Hi, welcome to Dreaming of Chess Mastery. I'm Neil Priest, and this is my YouTube channel that delves into the world of adult chess improvement. Of course, if you're looking for more constructive content, perhaps something that will improve your openings or things like that, well, this is the wrong place. No split screens, no boards. If you want that sort of content, you probably know where to find it. I'm going to focus on things from a more psychological, philosophical, sometimes even pedagogical angle. Anyway, here goes for this week. And I apologize for not having made a video for a while. I've been traveling, and also, frankly, I'm recovering from a rather nasty bout of flu. So, chess. Yesterday, I watched the latest Ben Johnson interview on perpetual chess, and I was quite keen to watch this episode, listen to it, but I like the YouTube. I like to see the faces, although you can listen to it in a more podcasty sort of way. But I enjoyed this one because it had a Brazilian flavour. The guest was Alexander Fier, a very strong Brazilian grandmaster, five-time Brazilian champion, and a peak FIDE rating of, I think, 2653, something along those lines. At any rate, he's an interesting character, plays an extraordinary amount of chess, hundreds of games every year, just doesn't stop playing. But Ben always delves into books. He's something of a bibliophile, and also people's background. And what I wanted to mention today was something that was quite mind-blowing. When Alex was a young chess player, his parents were, well, his father was, I think, a fairly strong player, probably 1900 plus, and had a decent collection of books. So from a young age, Alex started serious chess study. And when Ben was asking about this, he started listing the books that he did in a period, he said, from about 8 to 12. I'm not sure if I'm not sure how accurately he did or does or doesn't recall ages. Sometimes people, when they think back to their youth, can have a memory that's a little less than precise. But it was in that sort of ballpark figure. And over a period of time, he studied the classics, certainly what was available in his home. And they were the classics. And he started mentioning books that he'd worked through. Of course, there's and I've seen a copy in a bookshop in Brazil, so it's certainly a book available here. The famous Polgar tome, 5,334, I think that's what it is, positions. And it's full of the mating twos and mating threes and some short games and combinations. And I mean, it's an enormous book. And so at a young age, Alex had worked through all of that. He also worked through Maxime Bloch, Russian grandmasters, combinational play, something like that. And I had a quick look on Amazon and the book of blocks that's available. I'm not sure if it's the same one, same edition, but that's 1,400 puzzles. And he solved the... now again, I might get the number wrong. Domination in 2,554 studies by Kasparian, the Soviet-era chess composer, endgame studies featuring the theme of domination of a piece. And this is often cited. They are not easy, but it's often cited by players who reach grandmaster strength or IM strength, and people who are in the camp of solving endgame studies is good for your chess. Not everybody is. Some people say, I'm not that realistic. You'll never get this position in the game. And other people point out that, well, that's not the point. The idea is that it develops your imagination, calculation ability, and in particular identification of the opponent's resources. And this is what Alex was talking about, how the puzzles have really interesting play. They are world famous because it has interesting play for both sides. One side comes out on top, but you have to identify the exact right sequence because there are lots of false paths that fall prey to cunning counter traps and counterplay. But if you're doing a bit of maths, that's over 9,000 puzzles. And it sounds like he did that in about a 3-year period, at the end of which he'd surpassed 2,200 FIDE strength. And I started thinking about this, and I think this is not extraordinarily unusual for people who become grandmasters. And Fear at some point was the youngest Brazilian grandmaster at 19. Not that young these days, things have changed, but that was 20 years ago, so it was all a little bit different then. And certainly it was in Brazil, where there were fewer tournaments and opportunities. Perhaps things are improving now, but 20 years ago, and we're kind of talking about the time when I'd just arrived in Brazil. Perhaps we even played in the same tournament. I can't remember. The point is that Alexander Fear was something of a prodigy, displayed excellent strength at a young age. But chess was, and still is, it seems, all that he spent his time on. I mean, he picked up languages, he speaks 4 or 5 languages, he's married and has a child with a Georgian lady, women grandmaster. He attended university, turns out just for a month. So he found the courses interesting, but he said that he went off to play a tournament and then just never went back to university, and that was that. And Brazilian schools are, traditionally, things are starting to change now, are morning or afternoon. So you're in 2 cohorts, attend the same school. There's a lack of resources, really. So you might attend school in the morning, but then in the afternoon, okay, you get your homework out the way, and then you're home free. And he said he was never really interested in other sports. So he was studying, I'm sure, 5-6 hours a day, consistently. And he said he's always loved chess. He loved reading about chess. He had lots of books at home. He loved studying chess. He said he lacks discipline, but enjoys working at chess. And that may sound contradictory, but it just means, and this was his point, that he never did things in a very rigorous, systematic sort of way. And perhaps he would have been better if he had. Who knows? I think the message, though, is clear. That the only way to make really big improvement is by doing a lot of work. I mean, I often come back on this channel and talk about it. But in this case, watching this interview, it struck me that Alex had given us something that was sort of quantifiable. And curiously, in my sort of adverts from Chessable that pops up in my email inbox, there was some information on a new course by a grandmaster whose name escapes me, but the course is called 50-Day Endgame Challenge. And essentially consists of 50 sets of 7 endgame problems. They're taken from real games, they're not endgame studies, but endgame positions that you need to analyse and find the sequence that wins the game. But endgame, so not specifically necessarily a tactical sequence, but a calculation exercise nonetheless. And sort of putting these two ideas together, it strikes me that one of the things that we need to do, perhaps, in a sort of personal gamification of our adult chess improvement, is set ourselves some sort of target of problems to solve per day, and just crack on. It seems to me that somewhere in the region of 6 as a sort of starting point minimum would be quite handy. That would generate 2,000 puzzles a year. 5 years, 10,000 puzzles. You can do a lot of these big blocks of study. Now, if you're going to be successful, this requires a lot of commitment. It perhaps might help to have a couple of, a couple of source materials on the go at the same time. Something where you can work through things reasonably quickly, and some problems that require much deeper thought. For example, if you start working on the Polgar, and I have, on the Polgar Mating 2s, part of the Dojo program, the early puzzles are quite quick. And certainly in 15 minutes I can do a reasonable number of them. Give myself half an hour, and I can probably finish 6 of them. And that might be, for the moment, a sort of a baseline of puzzles for me to solve. Mating 2s is one sort of problem, one line of investigation, perhaps something else, tactical sequences, endgame positions, who knows? And have this happening as a sort of a daily discipline. Now, it's not all that Alex did, and it's not all that we need to do. We need to study other things. But if you start out each day and say, look, come what may, I'm going to solve 6 of these puzzles every day. Maybe in the morning I have just 5 minutes. I can solve one of these problems. Lunch I can do a couple more. In the evening I don't have a lot of time. I'm tired. I do 3. That's your 6. And it's a sort of discipline is the right word, in the sense of a daily discipline, a practice like brushing your teeth, or for some people who are trying to improve their health, they go for a walk every day, come what may. Hardy souls in North European countries who have a dip in an ice pool every day. Well, there's a million different ways that we might express our daily discipline. If you're of a religious bent, it might be reading a psalm from the Bible. I don't know. But something that you do religiously every day, come what may. Will Shortz, the composer of crosswords, started playing table tennis, and he's been doing that for thousands and thousands of days. He just doesn't miss a game of table tennis. I think this could be a bedrock for your adult chess improvement. Anyway, I've sort of whittled on for long enough. I'll blame my recovery from flu for being a little long-winded. Anyway, let me know what you think. Forgive me if it's dragged on a bit, and I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Otherwise, I trust you're enjoying your chess. And until the next video, it's ciao from a sunny Brazil.